Hello and welcome to a special, somewhat private coffee and critique for our Patreon winners. I will probably make this video accessible to everyone at some point in the near future, but a special message to all of the 52 Frames patrons. This is just but a small thank you and a token of my appreciation. There's so much that I want to say in this video, but I do want to get to your photos, so I'm gonna babble less, but just know that it makes all the difference. It's not just a little boost, it's not just a step forward towards much needed improvement in the project as far as the bigger vision and going off of Facebook and having our own website with our own functionality and creating a much richer community for that. But it is all that, but it's a bit more binary for me. It's really the existence of going on each week. It's because of you guys. So I just wanted to thank you so much. The existence of the project, that is, not my life. Thank you guys so much. And we're gonna go, and I'm gonna go over. I pulled out, this wasn't easy. Took some technological finesse here. I guess for those that are joining us on the later broadcast after I make it live on YouTube for the rest of the community, this is a screencast critique on our past album for 52 Frames. I'm going to go over week number 37, Emotion. And first I'm going to go over the photos from the 8 winners, if you will, Patreon winners. We were at 92. And put out a mini contest, which was Ernst's his idea to reach 100. And we reached 100 because of you guys, and we actually reached 103. So I'm just going to add those 3 in on top. So we're going to go through basically Patreon number 92 to 103, these 11 photos. And then after that, I've chosen, how many did I choose? It looks like 8, another 8 at random. So this will take a bit of time. I'm going to try and do it quickly because it's going to be much too long if I ramble on every photo. But I really wanted to do this with intention. I looked at every photo beforehand. I wanted to say something that would help you in your journey. And of course, this is a snapshot, if you will, as it's just 1 week. And ideally, I would be able to go over a few of your photos or photos that you decide. But that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, and there's some photographers here that I recognize that I'll point out. Clearly, it was an off week, and that's fine. I'm going to critique it anyways. It all helps. You know what I mean? If you took my photos, if you looked at my photos, I'd like to think that I try and be an example for the rest of the community, because I am also a participant. And I don't know if people forget, but for me, it's quite important. I mean, I am taking on a weekly challenge. I have not missed a week in 5 years. And if you look at my photos across the board, it's the same ups and downs. You could pull out the same week where I had an off week and I just shot with my phone or whatever it is. And I think that's very much the point. I know you always hear me typing it, maybe not saying it as much on these screencast critiques, but it really is just about getting that tick mark every week and not breaking the chain, being consistent, because that is what creates something, a tangible thing, a paradigm shift, something where there was nothing in your life that could then blossom. It's a seed. It's so much more than a photo. On that thought, I'm going to just skip ahead to Okay. Our very first one. Great transition. Let's dive into it now. This is by Donna Samples, I believe. I don't have last names for everyone, but I did pull out everyone's first name, which I don't usually do because, as you can see, the file name here is image.jpeg.jpg, which you can imagine can get confusing because the next image is also image.jpeg.jpg. So if you can, at least for the sake of these screencasts, but also in general, if you named your file something like here, Virginia _ Abra week 17, or it probably says week 37, that is, or interesting that you called it week 17, red 26. I don't know what that means. I think you maybe titled that wrong. Maybe not the best example, but even here, this is Lonnie. She has her last name here. Much easier for me to see it. For general terms, it's not mandatory, but it does help. But again, for this special screencast, I really wanted to get your names and read about your photos a bit. So, Donna. So, let's start with the positive. And the positive isn't about the photo. I mean, obviously, it's all about the photo. But I'll just bring in... This is your photo on Facebook, which, by the way, I find the same as everyone else. I go and I look in our posting order doc and I click on the link. I don't have any special access to Facebook. I'm using it as a user just like the rest of yous, although I guess I do have special access with the script to get all this good stuff in. But I pulled up your photo. What I wanted to point out is your caption. You write, "This is Crosby, my coach at CrossFit. 52 frames, which I've been doing for 37 weeks, is partly the reason I've been doing CrossFit for nearly 13 weeks." And that really touched me because that is this thing, I really should come up with a better term than that, meaning the transition, the paradigm shift, the experience, the understanding of the ability to create something in your life is repeatable, and you can always look back at that and say, well, I did that, you know. You walk up to a stranger and you say hi, then that is now an access point that you can use later on. And you can say, well, I did it once. I can walk up to a stranger again and do it again. Or I walked up to a stranger, then I can walk up to, you know, a girl and ask her number, something like that. It's also, you know, laterally. And that's why I always say it's not about photography. And that's why this touched me, because you're counting weeks, right? There's something that you've now taught yourself, or you've taught your brain, rather. You've done something for 37 weeks. Now, that sounds a lot, but you know that you took it week by week, and you can see now that you are a changed person because of it, right? I know I'm getting deep here, and I will get into the photos more, but I felt like because it was a special screencast that I did want to touch on this, because I think you guys have it. Obviously, you guys are supporters of the project, so you have it, you see it, you recognize it, and you're like, this is something that I want to invest in, that I want to help out, and I think it's great. And you applied it to exercise, and you're counting weeks, 13 weeks. It's like, it's much more doable, and I think that's really cool. As far as the photos, so let's come back here, and I'm actually going to bring that Facebook page back, because I actually do have a critique on our community for the first time, which I think is worth mentioning. But The flaws that I see in this photo, and my apologies for taking so long to get to this point, but this is gonna be over 30 minutes. Let's just settle in. All right, guys, it's gonna be a long one. The flaws here, first of all, is to me it looks like you shot this with a phone. That's my sense when I look at it. And I believe you didn't. Let me see. Oh, so you have no EXIF. Okay, so maybe you did shoot it with a phone. That's one indication. I think this naming scheme also, image.jpeg.jpg, I've seen it before, and it seems to... Oh, no, this is with a DSLR. Okay, so forget that. Must be the editing program. We're seeing a general lack of clarity, and that is an indication of noise, either noise from your sensor, which means either your ISO is too high, or just in general your camera can't keep up with a low light situation. And if you're shooting with a phone, a low light situation means indoors. If you're shooting with a Canon 60D, a low light situation means indoors and only one light on, right? If you're shooting with I'm sorry, I only know Canons, but if you're shooting with a Canon 5D Mark III or a Nikon DA10, then a low light situation is a very shallow bulb, a very low wattage bulb, or a very, extremely low light. So you have to understand where the weaknesses in your specific gear that you're shooting with. A phone, anything indoors is considered low light for a phone, and you're gonna get this. You're gonna get this grit, this dirt. I mean, I'm zooming in a stupid amount, but just to show you this lack of detail, you wouldn't see it like this anyways, these big blocks. You wouldn't see that on a DSLR or on a photo that wasn't shot with either a high ISO or some gritty processing that you did in post. So that's one, but the bigger critique that I had was this vignette, and that is also the critique that I have for the community, because I mean, I'm guilty of this. Actually, when I first started photography, way back, when I started 52 Frames, it was the same time, I read one of these, 7 tips to achieving greatness in the world and becoming a millionaire. I'm exaggerating. It was about photography, and one of them said, like, vignette everything. It said vignette everything, and I did. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's great. You create a vignette, and suddenly you're like, bang! You're like zooming into the subject, into the center of the frame, and it's automatically artsy. And I realized that that's not the case. There is a place to vignette, and vignettes are also very good. But if you look at the thumbnail here, it's actually more noticeable that you see a circle. You're seeing a circle of light. And what you see before any of like the artsy and seeing the subject pop more than the surroundings and everything else that you think a vignette is doing for you, what you see is, let's call it amateur post-processing. You see that somebody just took went to Picasa and went to that vignette slider and just slid that mother down, and shipped it. And there is a more elegant way to do it. And if it's not a tutorial for right now, but there's a way, there are different ways to make a vignette softer. And if you are using Picasa, there's nothing wrong with that, or something like that. Just go easy on the slider. It's a bit heavy. And the critique that I wanted for the community was that I didn't see any photographic critique here. And while it is a lovely photo, and I can very easily talk for 10 minutes about that it's, a great puppy, and, it's cool and it's cute, and it is. And that is either as important as the photographic technique, or even more important, okay? But my critique here is shifted towards the photography. The point here is to get better at photography. And I think the community can do a little bit of a better job. For me, I would think that the heavy vignette and the softness of the image, the digital aspect of this chunky type of grain are, let's call it, obvious enough flaws that I felt should have been pointed out by the community. Hope that's not harsh. I hope that's received well. I don't think any of this is not important. I think this is great. I've spent way too much time on this photo because I've connected it so much, because I connected to your critique. But I had the critique on the community, and I said it. So there. I hope that helps, and I'll try and go faster from here, because at this rate it'll be well over an hour, and we'll try and condense that. Apologies for the laundry machine noise in the background. I never do screencasts with the laundry machine on for that reason, but you got to embrace the notion of imperfection, and this is it's imperfect. It is for about 20 reasons not the right time for me to do this screencast, and I sat down anyways and I did it. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. Okay, moving right along. We have here Marla. If I did it correctly, then your first name would be Marla. I'm not sure, but I think so. So similar critique here, and we see here we are getting some EXIF that it is your phone and your front camera, no less. For those that don't know, your front camera of your phone is way less quality than your rear camera. If you're going to shoot with your phone, try as much as you can to shoot with the rear camera lens and not the front. The front, it's like the selfie. So off the bat, it looks grainy. Your resolution is much smaller also. Your resolution is 759. So if you look at the tutorial I made on YouTube about the best export settings to Facebook, you want to be 2048 wide. That's like the sweet spot. So when I pull this up here, you see how much smaller it is than some of these other ones. Let me try and see what I would do to repair this. You see there's a lot of grain at this point to try and rescue this, if you will. And apologies for not sandwiching. I'm trying not to focus on what I like so much about these photos. I'm trying to focus more on the critique. So for the sake of this screencast, you'll have to, put your thick skin on, and don't be alarmed. But I'm gonna just, for the sake of time, even though this is taking even this bit of a slow pace as it is. So this is a very rare suggestion of increasing the grain here, just because it's so grainy that I feel like if I were to take this, if you were to just plop this here on my table, then I would feel like I have no choice but to own it if I can't go back to the original, which is the case right now. And I would just add like a whole bunch of grain and just find some kind of film look so that it looks a bit more artsy. Now, I've seen this done in the past in 52 frames, and I always critique it because I don't think it looks better. But I think in this case, it would be better to own it. The other thing I would do is just lift the highlights a bit and maybe just make it even more artsy, just lower the shadows even more. Just make it like super artsy and creative, something like that. I feel like that's at least owning this type of shot. You go a little bit crazy with it. Here's the before, here's the after. It just, at least it seems to me like there's more intention to this. I think it's a bit much, which you guys should see, but I think it's at least on the side of creativity as opposed to being pigeonholed by the flaws of your gear, which unfortunately you can't always account for. Okay, Joanne. This is a very touching photo. I'll just bring over quickly. This is a good friend of yours battling cancer. It's difficult for me to critique this because I'm not critiquing the moment, and it really is something special. So I'll say it here. I'll try not to say it again. Also, like, I felt this way for most of these photos. These are all phenomenal moments. These are all really, really quality moments that you guys got. I'm just going through the technical, because you guys really did a good job with what you're supposed to do, and that's pick up a camera and document and create something. So we're just taking it a step further here. For this, what spoke to me was, or called out to me rather to critique, was the skin looks like it's digitally crispy. It looks like it's over clarity-ified. If I were to, let's try something. If I were to, let's say I'll lower the contrast here. And the contrast is the, when you up the contrast slider, what you're doing is you're making the darks darker and the lights lighter. So you're creating more contrast between the light and the dark. So when you lower the contrast, you're softening that relationship. And for something like wrinkles in the face, by lowering the contrast, you're making it smoother. Now this isn't going to look realistic. I'm just overdoing it so that you can see what I'm seeing. This is an over exaggeration here. And I'm not implying that you should take a subject like this and smooth out their skin so that it doesn't look real. What I'm saying is, Joanne, I think your processing here didn't look real to the other extent. It looked a bit blotchy on a digital level, not on the actual skin. Okay, so let me go back here, and we'll just like lower the contrast in general and like raise some of the shadows and maybe even it out. And we still want it a bit moody and a bit darker. So here's the before. I hope you can see what I did. I feel like this isn't the best explanation on this one. But I think ultimately your processing was causing these imperfections in the skin. But a really amazing moment. Really, it was really touching. Okay, we have Tamar. Also, a really, really touching moment. This is like a great moment in time. For me, I actually really like the available light that you have here. You see that this woman is being lit probably by this lamp over here in the back, and then there's another light source here, and that's getting catch lights in her eyes. The lighting is quite good for what looks like a shot in whatever ambient light that you had available in front of you in the scene. What I would do is just level it off. You see here, we're all in the shadows here. I would just lift those shadows and we'll start to see some more of the scene. Now it's getting a bit blotchy, so maybe I'll like add some luminance noise reduction just to smooth that out. And then I'll add a little bit of clarity just to add some of that detail back in. And I'll lower the contrast just to even out the whole scene again, a little bit like I did on the last one. And I'll just lower the exposure slightly to get back a bit to the look that you had. And for me, this is just more even. I'll show you the before and the after. Maybe I did it and lower the shadows a bit. Before, after, we're just seeing, it's not that we're seeing I don't need to see this staircase perhaps, but over here, because there are blacks in the photo here that are crushed, meaning it's too far black to repair, to bring up that data by bringing up your exposure slider. And if I showed you here the clipping warning for the shadows, for the blacks, you'll see this whole area. And here, I brought it up so that there's the data is there. I feel like I'm able to see the picture. And on some level, your brain, when you're looking at this photo, you feel like you're being cheated. You feel like there's something that you can see. And for me, it's like her hair over here. I'm like, I want to see that data. It's even like just these little dark parts where when you lift it, the underside of her hand, so you're seeing more of the image. So keep that in mind when you process. If your camera can't cut it, then your software should. Virginia, really nice photo here. This is a very simple tweak, and I mentioned this at some point in my career. I don't know if it was this year, but when you're doing a low-key shot, it doesn't mean that your highlights should be in the gray area. It doesn't mean that your highlights can't be exposed properly. So what I mean by that is if we bring up these highlights, I think the balance is achieved more in the photo and the way your brain processes it. And it's still this. I think it's the same scene. I don't think I'm changing your composition at all. But here you're muddled. You're in the grays. Everything is very dark. And here everything is still like, it's still, you got the 80% black or whatever you have here. But the highlights are highlights. The highlights don't have to be moved down to that gray area in order to be low key. Really nice shot. Giedra, I am a big fan of your work in general. I think you've won cover numerous times this year. And I looked at this and I said, hey, emotion. Let me see, did I brought this out. So I pulled it up and I see that you kind of owned it. You said, all right, I didn't think that this would be my emotion shot, but you'll have to accept it. Barring that aside, the only critique I could think of here is that we're seeing some noise in your shadows here, some grain. Now, much different to the big blocky grain that I showed you earlier. This is probably shot on a higher end DSLR, which I believe is what Giedra shoots with. So the noise is much... It's more clear that it's sensor noise and it's much smaller. So when you zoom out, you're not really seeing it as much. But I noticed it in the shadows, and you probably did that. You probably have that because you amped up your clarity so that the spider web was clear. And the fix to do that, to achieve a clarity in your foreground but have this background be smoother, is simply by bringing it into Photoshop, which I'm not going to do now, and layer it up and then create a layer mask just on the background, meaning you just want to take that background and let's see if I could just show you and just smooth it out. I mean, here I'm smoothing it out in Camera Raw, but you can go into Photoshop and do a much better job at it. And now you can see the clarity of the spider web, but the background looks nice, nice and smooth, and you get that bokeh. So that would just be my critique for that. Here we have Dina, really great shot also. I like this rough processing. I actually really like this black and white, how you have it. Your photo's not in focus. And I'm looking at your EXIF data here, and I can't tell what lens you have. For some reason, it's showing me your camera body, and it's showing me that you're at 85. But I would guess that it's not a macro lens, and maybe that's why you missed focus, because your subject was too close to the lens. And my guess is that it's a zoom lens and not a prime lens, meaning it's 55 to 105, let's say, something like that, like a zoom, as opposed to 85 prime. But it could be, because 85 is a focal length that's popular for prime lenses. In general, I would recommend that everyone pick up prime lens, especially the 50 millimeter 1.8. It'll be the best investment you ever make. And your photos will improve leaps and bounds, especially for something like this. You'd still need a macro if your subject's going to be this close, but in general, I can't tell you why, but your focus was off on this, and that would be my main critique for that. This is something that I think is worthwhile pointing out because I noticed it in a few places, and there is a guide. I don't like saying the word rule, but there is a general suggestion, if you will, in photography, and that is, and I'm pretty firm on this most of the time, not all the time, of course, like any photography rule, and that is to have your subject a bit brighter than everything else in the image. The brightest part of your image should be the subject, whatever that is, and the human eye naturally is drawn to that brightest part immediately in the frame. So interestingly enough, in this shot, Joanna, it's the opposite. You have all the brightest areas are in the background, and then the darkest areas is your subject's face. Even your subject's arms are brighter than the face. And I would try and reverse it. Now, can't really do that on a JPEG, but I can maybe hint to it. We'll just take up the shadows here, and yeah, something like that. And then I would just bring out the eyes. Laundry is done, people. Come on. Boom. It's all in the eyes, and I think this is it's the same photo. I think you actually see the emotion even more, and you're not compromising the natural tendency of human beings when they're looking at graphical media. It's simply that you're drawn to the brightest part of the image, and I think this creates more balance. You're seeing the subject's eyes, you're seeing that emotion. Here it's rather hidden in the shadows, so something to keep in mind for that. And all of these critiques, it looks like they're all post-processing, but it's not. This is just what I have in front of me. If you guys were standing next to me with your cameras, then I can pick up your camera and say, oh no, shoot, do this, do that. But you can take this critique that I'm giving you and apply it to shooting in camera, not in processing. Please apply it in processing also. That's I think more obvious. But I'm saying, when I say you should have your subject lighter, that's something you should be doing in camera, preferably. Now, if you have to, and you could do this in post, and I've shown you how, then cool. How could you do this in camera? Raise the exposure. Well, won't that make the background even brighter? Yeah. So maybe you want to go to a less bright background, or maybe you want to fill your subject with an off-camera flash or a lamp. Then you can start brainstorming. But the concept is there. Look at a scene. How do I get my subject the brightest? What's cool is that for me, this took many years. Some people have it naturally, but I started doing that in real life, and I started not saying, how can I make my subject the brightest, but I would look at a scene and see something brighter than everything else. And that was my photo. That I stopped looking at when I first started taking photos, I would look at design. I mean, I still do. I see lines and patterns and symmetry. And then I started getting more into color. So I would match like colors and design and patterns and symmetry. And it was only years later that I was looking at light. And I think it helps to shoot in black and white, not make it black and white, but shoot in black and white. And you see like the interplay of the light and shadow. And I mean, that's, you start getting into like the classics of, what photography is. It's light and dark. It's less about the colors and how your subject is posed and all that. Everything is very important. But at the end of the day, when you can identify good light and light contrast in a scene and take a photo, That's like next level stuff. At least for me it was. Maybe some people start with that, and it's the symmetry that, throws them. But speaking from my own experience here. Okay, so we got 3 more, and then I'm gonna probably a little bit quicker go to the other 8 that I chose at random of other Patreon supporters of the community, which I also looked at beforehand. And I hope you guys are well caffeinated here. I am not. It's late at night. For a coffee and critique, I don't have a coffee in front of me, but I do have a water, and I'm going to hydrate right now. Hold on. Okay. Bracha. So in general, and you may have gotten this critique from the community. I hope they did it nicely. But how should I put this? We frown. How can I put this without sounding too pretentious? We frown on these, collage-esque multi. Basically, it's a frame a week, right? That's the challenge, is to take one photo. You got one photo a week. Doing this is a little bit of a cheat. It's a little bit that you're taking, 9 photos this week, and you submitted all 9. Now, putting 52 frames aside, I really like this. I really like this collage, and if I had a kid this cute, I would probably do the exact same thing. So you've done nothing wrong, and it's a really nice, clever photo that you've put together here. But for the sake of 52 frames, you probably want to choose one. I would probably choose this one for 52 frames. My biggest critique here is your white balance, and I think it appears that you shot this indoors. I don't think you have a flash going, so you're using available light, which is a bit of a tricky situation, but you did pretty good. I mean, I'm not bothered by the lighting. Excuse me. But, and this is something that's, man, this took me a bit of time to realize, and it always bothered me, but I didn't know what it was, and that is white balance. And you'll see this in indoors. You'll see this when you're shooting in incandescent settings. And an easy fix here I have it in Adobe Camera Raw. This exists in Lightroom, and I believe this even exists in free, simpler programs like Picasa and the like. But even if it didn't, this temperature slider didn't exist for white balance, there are other ways to achieve this. But basically, this is a bit too yellow, and we want to just move it down to the blue. Okay, and this was too blue and looks a little bit green, so I'll move that over to the purple. Then I'll move that back up a little bit until it just looks more natural. And I don't know if this wall was white behind her, but it was probably closer to white than yellow. And I'm just playing with it here. Looking at this, it pops out more like a more professional photo. For me anyways, the colors look more accurate. Your adorable girl's skin tone looks more accurate. I'd maybe just tweak it just slightly, but let's look at the before. And I want you to recognize this color, this yellow cast, because if it comes up in your photo, you just need to add some blue, whether that's a color temperature here or doing it another way. And if you want it stylized, you want it a little bit of like a yellow edge, you could do that in other ways. Here I can just go to curves and go to my blue and just bring that down slightly, and that'll at least give the highlights a bit of a yellow. Or maybe just add it to the shadows. It's a bit more stylized. Or I could go here to my split toning and put the highlights over here, and then make the shadows something crazy like green, and then you could scale that back in Photoshop or something. This here is a bit more of a stylized, but compared to your original, I think it's still more accurate on the white balance. Okay, so we got two more. We got Lonnie here. My critique for this is the same as the other black and white, and that is I feel like it's much brighter here. The brightest part of your photo is not the subject, so I would just brighten this guy. That's way too much. And it works with clarity also. I'll just add a little bit of clarity and a little bit of sharpness, and then you can go and I'll create another brush here and just do the opposite. I'll bring down the highlights and the shadows. I'll bring down the clarity a little bit and down the sharpness and raise some noise. You're not really going to see it so much, but it's interesting that when you do this in a scene, that was pretty subtle what I did, but because I softened it, here's the before and the after. Your eye is drawn to the brightest part of the image and also the clearest part of the image, which is why beautiful photos with bokeh, let's say like this, there's a reason why you're drawn to the spider web right away, or in a portrait when you have a very wide aperture and the background is all blurred, you're drawn to that face, to your subject's face, because it's also the clearest part of the frame. Finally, Shifra, this is a really moving photo. This is another excellent moment. The photo, though, looks to me like a snap, and I'll try my best to morph it into something that, if it were mine, what I would do. And first of all, again, this could be preference, and we don't want to lose too much of there. I think just that crop, him on the left side, to me just feels better than just having him out. He's kind of floating in the middle here. And here, now that his eye is in the center, to me it's just a much more clean composition. And for some reason, this just speaks to me that it should be in black and white. It could just be my preference. Again, we're going to say that he should really be brighter than everyone else, right? So I would just brighten him up in the foreground, and maybe just make that super clear, his eye. And then what you could do is, again, you can bring down some of that highlights and whites and sharpness and just come over with a brush. And I mean, I'm doing this very quickly. Then maybe I'll just, in general, I think the photo needs a little bit of clarity, and I'll just like up the whites a bit, and maybe just up the exposure a bit. And to me, it speaks to me more. I see him more. Let's try, I could show you before and the after minus the crop. But let's see, if I save it, I'll show you, duplicate it, and then go to this guy, and then go to default, and then clear the crop. Just, all those steps. Here's a before and the after. Again, to me, the black and white was popping out to me, and we brightened up his face. We lowered everything else. Here, the brightest part of the image is back here, and his eye is actually one of the darkest parts of the image, which to me is the main point of this. I would even take this a step further and maybe lower the exposure a little bit on his face and raise the exposure on his eye. How you can apply this in camera, you would have to raise the exposure here for him, and I would maybe get closer. And yeah, you would have things brighter in the background also. That's the trade-off. You're shooting high noon. It's not an easy condition, but I hope that helps. Okay, so with the remaining time that we have, we'll settle in. What did I say? It's going to be over 30 minutes. It's going to be over an hour. But I'll try and do this a little bit quicker. Here are some other amazing members of our community who have contributed using Patreon. They've become patrons and they give a monthly contribution towards 52 frames in achieving something really grand. I know some people contribute based on the work that's done week to week, and it that is important. And I do put in money every week, or every month, I should say. There's a lot of money that comes out of my pocket just to keep the project alive, because it is something that I believe in, just besides everything else. But I'm not taking this Patreon money, and I don't know if I've ever really explained this. It's not something that I'm putting it towards my own expenses. I'm still paying my own expenses. It's something that I'm storing away for this much grander vision of getting a developer and getting some significant development for a proper amount of time to make this site something really special, something really amazing. So let's get to these 8 here. So interesting. So this is Lizette, and I actually went on my computer and did a quick search. If you guys don't know about this piece of software, it's amazing. It's called Search Everything, and it's instant. You just type and it tells you instantly what's on your whole computer. And then you can even sort by folder. And doing that, I can just quickly at a glance look at somebody's photos, because Lizette names her files Lizette. See, so if this was image.jpg.jpg, I wouldn't be able to do it. But if you notice, Lizette is awesome. And I've noticed your photography before, and I really do appreciate your work every week. And so then I saw this one, and to me it's clearly, obviously this is some kind of artistic technique that you took out of some piece of software to make it look painterly. But even so, it looks like it was shot with a phone. It's a bit more of an amateur snap. And I was like, all right, Lizette, what's the story here? So I pulled out your photo on Facebook. Here it is. And I know this is not my best submission from a technical. It's like, so I see, like, you owned it, and then I read about this amazing caption that you have here. And horses are really incredible creatures. And I think my point here is less to critique yourself, to critique your photo, because like I said in the very beginning, like, everybody's got their week where they just submit. But this isn't, I don't think you just submitted because you ran out of time or something like that. I think this was the moment for you. And I think the community really wrote some very nice feedback for you. And I think they too realized that, without your caption, if you just posted this photo, let's say, without any backstory, I think you wouldn't have gotten such a nice feedback. And, this is really, I think, the best point, what stuck out at me from looking at your photos now and from looking at this album in particular is, like I said in the very beginning, the technique is as important or maybe less important than the moment. The moment is the most important. The moment is the most important. If you have perfect technique but you miss the moment, you don't have a good photo, even if it's technically perfect. It's part of embracing imperfection. It's part of going out there and shooting, whether you have an idea or not. It's about getting something. It's about making something that's tangible that wasn't there before, which is so much of the art form of what photography is in that medium. And this is a beautiful moment. And that's all I really wanted to say about that. So well done, Lizette, and I really appreciate your photos on a week to week. Okay, this is... Do I have your name here? I have two screens here, so I'm on the other screen, like all over the place. Nadine, this was not random that I pulled you out because you had responded to the thread that you were so sad that you weren't one of the 8 because you were a patron and you really want your photo critiqued. So you got it. See, sometimes the complainers, when you complain, it works. I really like this image. Beautifully centered. Now that I look at it, a little bit askew, I would say, just a smidge, just a drop. There you go. Again, what I would say here, your subject is darker than all of his surroundings. And it's cool. It kind of works in this context. But why is he, in the shade? It's not like it still bothers me, even though it's cool and it's done well. I think the subject here should be brighter. And let's see if I could just like pop him out a little bit. We'll just do a really rough kind of nasty fix, and we'll just like up it just so you can see him. Okay, and obviously that's gonna look kind of stupid, but I just want to show you. And then we'll take a new brush and we'll just, again, lower everything, lower the exposure. Really the highlights, at least just right around him, kind of just balance that out a little bit. And again, this is just a visual, just to show you. I'm not saying this is exactly how one should process. But all the messiness aside, I think this is more, what this scene should look like. I see him more now, and I would even just pop him out a little bit more, at least his face. Now, what can you do in camera to get this? Is you have to, you raise your exposure. I think your exposure was a bit dark because maybe you were on auto and your histogram is perfectly even. Your histogram is beautiful. And maybe if you were on auto, your camera's like, great, this is great, is 18% gray. I'm capturing good balance between light and dark because the camera doesn't really know that you have a person here in front of you. And if you raise up the exposure, this would all be blown out. So, that's the trade-off, right? There is no perfect scenario here, but I do think this was a bit on the extreme level of underexposed for your subject, but I really like the photo. Really nice job. Okay, Nick, generally your photos are a much higher level technically, and I looked up what this was, and this was a Bruce concert, I believe. Let me see if I have it here. Okay, I just shut that window, so now I'm not going to know any of your names. Whoops. Billy Joel, sorry. Messed that up. Sorry, Billy Joel fans everywhere. Bruce, they're both peers, I feel like. They're both kind of probably friends. Yeah, great moment. I think it's pretty flawed as a photograph. Like this stage here, clearly shot from a phone in a low light environment with super white hot lights in this low light scene. Very difficult to even shoot with a DSLR. So I think this woman is the point of this is the subject of your photo. Then you're kind of taking a photo of a screen, which when I look at a photo like that, I always feel like, well, it's not your photo, it's somebody else's. So a bit flawed, but I get it. You know, you had a good time. And I think, what did you write here? You just wrote, yeah. No apologies here. So that's all I have to say about that. Another really touching frame here from Jeremy, I believe. Sorry, I accidentally closed the window with your name, so now I'm not sure if I'll get this right. Of a friend of yours that passed, that took his own life. It's a completely side project for 52 frames. It's completely just it could be only about these moments. It can be only about our stories and where we are in the world. It could be nothing about photography, and 52 frames would still be an amazing project. So it's great that we get to meet you, Jeremy, and get to know your friend a little bit. From a photography point of view, again, I feel like these are similar. You're taking a photo of a picture. Here you're taking a photo of a screen. You're not taking a photo of an actual person here. So the subject is the picture. That would be my critique. But I think it works for what you did. It within context. I think it's really nice what you showed. So well done to you. Pride. Let me see if maybe I can get it back. Oh, I got it back here on the other screen. Okay, this photo was shot by Carenza. So Carenza, I think I'm gonna move a little bit quicker here, but I think your shutter was a little bit low. Your focus is a little bit soft, and it's not the focus. It's not out of focus, it's blurry. I saw this great YouTube video of the difference between out of focus and blurry. So you can kind of see the hairs. You see that you were in focus here, but if you look at the eye, which is the part that you focus on the best, it's a little bit blurry, which generally means that your hand moved or your subject moved because your shutter was too slow. And I'm seeing 1/40, which is pretty slow. What you could have done is raise your ISO. You had plenty of room here for your ISO is at 250. You could have raised that to something like 800, 1600. You have a 6D. You could have raised that to 1600 if you wanted easily and raised your shutter speed. Those are all theory, but I do really like the photo regardless. And it's kind of proof of kind of a good example of what I was saying before about having your subject being the most bright part of your photo. I guess 58 minutes. I feel like I'm slowing down. Okay, so we have 3 more here. Susan, really nice. Again, I was trying to figure out why this was soft. It just looks, we're seeing a lot of grain here, and I thought it was maybe shot with a phone, and I looked up your camera, and it's a Sony Alpha, which I think is kind of halfway between a point and shoot and a DSLR. Really good camera. So I think you may have processed this in a way that made it kind of gritty. We're seeing this this digital dirt. It's kind of a bit mushy, and it's times like this where I want to make a chart with my own adjectives, for what crunchy, when I say crunchy, what crunchy means, like digital dirt means, because I'm seeing it. I hope you guys are seeing it too. Maybe let me know and give me some feedback here if you guys, option A, understand what the hell I'm talking about. Option B, no idea, but you enjoy hearing the sound of my voice. Again, I would make him brighter. His shirt is very bright. The background is very bright. His face is dark. And also, where is he, right? When you're any kind of portraiture photography, the key is in the eyes. It's always in the eyes. And wherever that is. And if you're seeing the eyes, you're seeing the subject, and his eyes are covered, even though we see a whole lot more. I feel like I'm not seeing him. So maybe another angle would have been better. Maybe shooting down, shooting from below could have been cooler. So those are the two things that I would look out for. Shoshana, I really don't have much critique for this. I think you got it going. And I'm looking at your gear here. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend you ditching this zoom lens of 55 to 200 and get yourself a 50 millimeter. Because if this is what you can do with a 55 to 200, and this looks like a 50 millimeter shot, this looks like the level, like the quality. If this is what you could do with a zoom lens, you should be shooting on primes, and your photos will just hop right off the screen or the page, if you get it printed. But really nice job. I like what you're doing. So Renee, we will end off with you. Renee, for those that don't know, is one of the silent angels in 52 frames. There's a few people that do it, like Danielle and Marina, like these people. I try and shout their names from the rooftops. And there's other people that do a lot, but you don't know. They're the silent angels, and Renee is one of them. So thank you for all the work that you do for us, Renee. I really like this photo. What I like the best about it is this straight line on the bottom. Excuse my New York accent, on the bottom. It's a little bit yellow. Let's bring it over to the blue. So that looks a bit more natural to me, the lighting. And this isn't as clear as the other ones, but I do feel still that he's not as bright as he could be as compared to the rest of the image. So if I brighten his face a little bit and just his hair a little bit, and maybe if I just brought some things down just a bit, not a lot, because it really is about everything that's around him. That's a bit too much. Or let's lower the contrast around him. How's that? Let's look at a before and after and see. Let's see if we can see any difference here. This is before. This is after. So maybe a little bit too blue, or I'm gonna bring in a little bit of purple. Okay, before, after. For me, it's very subtle, but I feel like the exposure on his face is a little bit better. And maybe what I would do is, this kind of just screams to me a black and white scene. And at that point, you have a lot more latitude to process a little bit more aggressively. Once you're in black and white, the photo is more forgiving. The data is more forgiving because you're not trying to save the colors. It's just luminance. So maybe we'll apply noise reduction here. So that, to me, maybe we'll put a whole clarity on the whole scene. That, to me, I feel like is more, for me anyways. So that's just some ways to think about. I'm not saying even, that's a bit more of there's no right or wrong, but maybe a little bit more of a preference. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this 1 hour long special. You guys really deserve it, and so much more. It's just a small token of my appreciation for all of you framers out there who contribute to the project, who are patrons, who really help with fulfilling this bigger vision that we all have as a community to keep it going. And this is something that has been, for the last 5 years, just a part-time hobby of mine. I started this community. I run this community now with a lot of help from many of you. It doesn't make any money, of course. It costs me a lot of money, and we've had some really successful events over the last few years with different exhibits around the world. There's always things that are cooking, always ideas that I have. But I work in video production. I just do this, on the side when I can. and to improve my own photography as well. And it's something much bigger than me. And I was just saying this the other day, it's something that's much bigger than me, and I really feel that. And you guys, you patrons are really, you are the pillars of this community. You are the people that are taking a stand for this community and ensuring that it doesn't go anywhere, ensuring that we have the ability, even though the window is getting smaller, of continuing on for next year and creating something much more valuable for many people around the world where that have been changed by this project. And it's very humbling to see people come out and help the way you guys have, whether it's financially or otherwise, and I so much appreciate it, and it's so much more beyond me. So I hope that is just a little bit of my appreciation that you're sensing, and I hope it continues from here to to create a new frame for 2017. Until next time, you guys, happy shooting.